We have a Christian statesman who is free to identify himself as a follower of Jesus in London, New York, Dubai, and Johannesburg. Please join me to welcome His Excellency Obasanjo.
Let me welcome you, even though we are here in Ghana and you can be called daughter of the soil, as they say in my part of the world. But on this occasion, maybe it's also appropriate for me to welcome you. Lord Boateng, let me also welcome you. Again, you are home from home, and it's nice to see you again and see you here, particularly seeing you here after Brexit. Our brother, Ambassador Nwencha, let me thank you most sincerely. As you have mentioned of the prayer breakfast, which together we are resuscitating, I thank you for your effort in that particular instance. But I thank you because you said you are retired but not tired. I want to assure you that there is plenty of work for those of us who are regarded as retired but not tired. And we have one looming in your own country now. We must avoid violence in the coming election in Kenya. I want to say to you, as I have said to you privately, I hold myself absolutely ready and prepared to do anything to avoid violence in that election. Dr. Adedovo, where is he? Oh, well, at one time you were here, and then at another time you were here. You seem to be like a bat, just. Let me thank you for taking on the task of propelling AFReG. One of our problems in Africa is lack of continuity. And we are never short of ideas. We are never short of proposals. We are never short of presentations. But our problem is how to turn ideas to action. And when we turn ideas to action, how do we consistent and persistent and indeed insistent on those actions? Thank you very much. Maybe I can say it here now. Maybe I should say it to you later. But we have to find a way, not setting up an institution, but a way that will really make this idea consistent and continuous. If you ask me, Maybe later on I will give a couple of ideas. Let me now turn to our brother Jose. I hope you can hear me, because there is need for us to continue the exchange which you have brilliantly started. As Dr. Adenevo said, the first of this forum was held when I was President of Nigeria. You know, the idea has always been, well, religion is there, government is there, and every going or moving in silo. Government there, religion there, what else? And we came with this idea that, look, religious leaders and leaders in government have a lot to do together. And in the best interest of our people, they have to work together. They have to understand themselves. They have to interact. And that was what brought the first forum about. What can we do to bring, if you like, that symbiotic relationship? And I think it was a good meeting, but again, continuity and follow-up. I don't believe we followed up as much as we should have followed up. I don't believe. Maybe that's one of the things that we will now have idea on what to do and how to do it. Now, let me go to the issue that have been mentioned and raised. And I agree entirely with you, Dr. Adenevo. My sister, I agree with you even on your short, very short verdict. Normally you are known to give longer verdict than that, but and Brother Wencha, I also agree with you. Let me come back to Gonzalez. I think we must never miss the point that the purpose and reason for European relations with Africa is purely exploitative and economic. The purpose and reason for relations between Europe and Africa is purely exploitative and economic. Now, if we bear that in mind, we will not make mistake. And whether it is colonialism, it is slave trade, it's slavery, it's neo-colonialism, it's even now that the buzzword globalization and all that, the purpose and the reason is exploitative and economic. Now, if that is the position, and we go back to slave trade and slavery, I believe it will be, yes, we should understand the perspective, but it will be wrong for us to start self-condemnation, whether those of us on this side or those of you on the other side. It will be wrong. It will be unfair to ourselves to start that sort of thing. Look, Yes, there are people on this side who, for whatever reason, intertribal war, intra-tribal war, even family food, they sell people or throw people into the hands of people who will take them as merchandise. And then between 10 and 12 million people perished. Now, if we are the most resilient race in the world, because if not for our resilience, there will be no black human being living on the surface of the world again. Now, so the point I want to make about this is we must know the history, we must understand the underlying issues, and we must educate ourselves. One of the pains, or one of the most painful things that has ever happened to me was when I was a member of Eminent Persons Group on South Africa. And there were 7 of us on one occasion. The Indian among us went to have a meeting with the Indian group in South Africa. And he didn't tell us. Then the news came to me, and I was acting as chairperson that day. So I told my co-chair, my confessor, I said, look, I will go and talk to our colleague, Mr. Singh. So I called him, and I talked to him. And Dame Nita Barrow, who was a member of that team, was furious with me, and said, I used to call her African Mama, and will call me brother. And he said, my dear brother, now I will not take this. The way your grandfather and your great-grandfather sold my great-grandfathers into slavery, you are about to start selling us into slavery here again. Oh no, I was pained. I was pained. That's not my perspective or understanding of slavery. Yes, there were people on the other side. Yes, they got to the other side on all sorts of different circumstances. But I will. And I told her, I will not accept blame for transatlantic slave trade. I will not. Because it's not my responsibility. Rather, I will now look to what can we do? And that is the issue what I'm coming to. What can we do to understand the issue? And what can we do to move together? Now, as I said, slave trade came and it did a lot of things, bad things. Elimination of identity, dehumanization of Africans, colonization followed, separation and division followed. But even then, there were people on this side who resisted it. When you go into our history, there were people who resisted and fought against the slave traders and against colonialism. But of course, since initially our history was not written by us. Like all things, our history was written by other people for us. And history is, of course, as perceived and as presented by the writer. So, as I said, we were told in school, Mango Park discovered River Niger, as if River Niger had never been there. Some people have lived here for many thousands of years. River Niger has been their source of living. And Mango Park discovered it. And in his school, I passed my history exam by repeating that Mango Park discovered. So, I do not rule out that there were accomplices, but we were more of victims. There were more victims than accomplices. The hard struggle for independence, those who survived on the other side of the so-called New World, again, continue to have their own struggle. But I believe at the point that we are at now, we should stop struggling in silos. And that is the point you are making. Africans rising together. We should now work out how we can rise together. Now, before we do that, and Dr. Adadevo, before we do that, before we take ourselves across the Atlantic, we need to put our house in order here. A situation where there's xenophobic attack on African youth in South Africa, and there's no round condemnation by South African leaders, is not acceptable to me. And it should not be acceptable to any African. A situation where African youth cross the Sahara in a very, very dangerous, rickety vehicles, and then go to the Mediterranean coast and make the Mediterranean a common grave for thousands of them, we as African leaders must bear full responsibility for their blood. Now that is not acceptable to me, and it should not be acceptable to any of us. Now, until we are able to put our house in order, then there will be a little that we can do across. We should appeal to our brothers. Ambassador Wencha brought it out. They are the 6th region of the AU. But even when we did that, and you know I was part of that, we left them to work it out. They haven't worked much out. Now, because who will lead them? How will they organize themselves so that they can be effective 6th region of the AU? How? I believe the Prime Minister of Jamaica once or twice came, but as you have seen, so many of them. We have to encourage them to put themselves together. Now, we struggle for independence, and we must thank our leaders who gave us independence. No matter what you think about them, they gave us independence. I say to Nigerian youth, because they are quick to say, well, what has happened? I say, look, what has happened is that these people gave us independence. Some of them languish in jail. Some of them give their life for it. So they gave us independence. And then I say to them, look, in Nigeria, that's the generation before us. Our own generation, I'm talking of Nigeria now, fought for the unity of Nigeria and established the foundation of democracy. You may condemn us for everything in the world, but you cannot take those two from us. And that you can get in every African country. What the independent generation did and what the following generation did. Now, so the question to me is not apportioning blame. It's not a blame game. It's what do we have to do? And what we have to do has started, but it's not moving fast enough, it's not deep enough, it's not wide enough. Ambassador Nwacha said, at the turn of the century, a number of things happened. One, we moved from OAU to AU. The charter of OAU is, or the constitutive act of AU is markedly different from the charter of OAU. And I'll just mention two or three. One, the OAU has no Peace and Security Council. The AU now has Peace and Security Council, not like the the Security Council of the UN. Thank God for that. The charter of OAU made our borders sacrosanct. The constitutive act of AU allows any African country, individually or collectively, to intervene in any other African country in the best interest of the citizens of that country who are Africans. And we have done it. We have done it, and we have done it successfully. 3, with AU, the emphasis on economic and social. With OAU, the emphasis was on politics. So we have begun. As soon as AU was settled or established, we brought on something we call NEPAD, a new program. It's a program for AU to be able to look at economic and social, but also a little bit on the political, particularly good governance, democracy and good governance issues. There wasn't anything like that in OAU. So we have started, but we have to be consistent, we have to move fast, and we have to, again, move away from received ideas. I went to prison, for those of you who do not know. I went to prison not because I stole, not because I committed any offense. It's because I was defending democracy, and I said, anybody who is in army uniform, who wants to rule, should put down his army uniform and go and contest election. The Nigerian military leader then, Abacha, decided that I have spoken too loudly, and he clamped me in prison. I was in prison for almost 3.5 years. It's a short period compared with Madiba. But when I came back, when I came out of prison and all that, one of the things that I started hearing is globalization. I said, look, I don't understand this globalization. What is it? Then they tried to explain it to me. And my understanding of it is that, look, you close your door, I should open mine. You can't come and take anything from my own house. But no, that is my understanding of it. Globalization for us. Because, look, what do we have when you talk of globalization for me to get as much as I can out of America? What do I have? So I went to Jamaica, and they were shouting this globalization, and I think it's one of their Emancipation Day. I think they have something in Jamaica they call Emancipation Day. And I was told to talk to them. I said, look, don't get carried away by this buzzword globalization. We black people have been globalized. Don't let anybody come and talk to us about globalization. If we have not been globalized, you won't be here. So what has anybody got to tell us about globalization? I don't accept it. And because everything they have told us that we should not do, they have done. They said, yes, structural adjustment meant that you should never put money to support agriculture. How can we? They said, no. Market. And of course we have to obey because they own IMF and World Bank. Otherwise, World Bank will punish us. And they punish this country when I decided that we will be self-sufficient in poultry. Now, that is a problem that we have to face. So what do we do? Africa rising. Good. But even with that, don't let us get carried away. We had it before, it didn't last. After independence, the price of commodities were high. It did not last. And then the advice we had was that, go for import substitution. They said, that's what is good for us. Buy the thing and you come and assemble. Don't try to have manufacturing. Just buy CKD. And then you come and assemble. And we all fell for it. When there was no money, they didn't give us CKD anymore. And it flopped. That failed. After that, they came up with structural adjustment. And some of us said, look, we have no even structure, and you are asking us to adjust. We have no. Now, come on, let us have structure before we adjust. Progress so far. My brother, one child, told us where we are, and I think we are making progress. But we have challenges. We are still separated. Take the West African zone or region that we are. We have Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone. Why don't we have Akanphone? Why don't we have Hausaphone? Why? Now, we are still separated. Even ECOWAS that has been in existence for 40 years, we have not been able to have, we have decided we will have one common currency, ECO will be the unit. We have not been able to come up with it. Because we said, okay, we will set up what they call convergence. I think 4 or 5 criteria. And I remember when I was there, when Ghana meets 3 of the convergence criteria, Nigeria will meet 2. Then next year, when Nigeria meets 3, Ghana will have fallen down to 2. So we could not converge. And because we could not converge, we are still separated. Now you imagine, how can we talk of a common market? You go to any market here, around here, and you want to use CD. You want to use CFR. You want to use, what do they spend in Nigeria? Naira. And it will be confusion. You won't make any progress. We must have common currency to have a common market. Now, that we are still separated, and we must get out of that. We do not know enough about ourselves. We don't. We need to know enough about ourselves. And if we don't know enough about ourselves, how can we deal and understand ourselves? The Bible says, my people are perishing because of lack of knowledge. And we aren't going to make any progress if we continue to have knowledge deficit. And we have knowledge deficit. Knowledge of ourselves, knowledge of our situation, knowledge of what goes on in our different countries. Then, we must give ourselves, and particularly our youth, hope. Hope. People ask me what's my worst fear about either Nigeria or Africa. And I said, look, I don't worry too much about conflict. They're there. I do not worry too much about even the so-called poverty. It's very much there, but I don't talk about poverty in Africa anymore. I talk about wealth generation. Let us change the narrative. The world is tired of Africa and poverty. What they want to hear about us now is how we are generating wealth for our people, how we are creating jobs and employment for our youth. And that we can do, and that we must do. Now, I've talked about hope, but I will want to talk about, for me, the most important: love. We do not love ourselves enough. Even as ordinary children of God by common grace, no matter what your religion, the fact that you are born a human being, you have common grace of God. How much of us ourselves do we love? And then we have saving grace in the name of Jesus Christ. How much do we, as those who call ourselves by the name of Jesus Christ, how much do we show love? Dr. Adedevo also talk about religiosity. I always hear that. We are very religious. But if we are religious and we are not spiritual, and if we are not spiritual, we will not be moral. And if we are not moral, we will not be ethical. You remember I said that. We have to. Now, if we are able to put our house in order on this side of the Atlantic, it will be easy for us to go to Jose and say, hey, what are you doing on your side? Come on. I said to my American brothers and sisters, the amount of resources that the African American people command and control, if they will only spend or bring 10% of it to Africa, it will make a world of change. Why don't we say that? And if we are strong here, economically, it will help them politically on the other side. If we are strong, President Trump, God bless his heart, he doesn't talk about Africa, which is good and bad for us. He doesn't talk about Africa. Some of my colleagues say, no, why shouldn't he? I say, please, leave him. But if we put our house in order, and we have 4 African countries that are among the 20 largest economies in the world, Trump will talk about Africa. And that's what we should do. And that's what we have to do. And we can do it. And we must do it. Just say, when I was president, I moved at the AU, and we had a meeting of Africa, South and South America Forum in Nigeria. The second one was held in Brazil after I've left office. Unfortunately, the third one has not been held. And I left office now, what? 20 years ago? No, No, I left office 10 years ago. 10 years ago. 10 years ago. The third one has not been held. We must find a way of that sort of thing working. And we must find a way, that's government to government. We must find a way of doing it on people to people. We must find a way of people doing it on people to people and moving along. And as you have said, as you have seen, if Brazil will trade with Africa more than it's trading with us now, there will be an impact. Now, add Argentina to it, you will even have greater impact. I think these are the ways that we should be looking at things and working our way forward. I believe that Africa has to, or Africans have to rise together, but there are things that we have to do on either side, separately, and then collectively on either side, and then together, bringing us on both sides together. I want to thank you once again, Dr. Adedovo, for not allowing this forum to die. And I pray that God will continue to give you the wherewithal to keep it alive. But let me say this, anytime you want me to be part of it, just as you have done for this year, call me and I'll be there. Thank you.